Welcome back to Turkish Spotlight Secrets, the place where the glossy veneer of fame is carefully lifted to reveal the heartbeat underneath. Tonight we take you to the water's edge, to a pinpoint on the Istanbul shoreline where everything tilted, where the version of a star we thought we knew was quietly set aside by the man himself. We're talking about Erkan Meriç, but not the Erkan from posters and billboards. This was a different presence, sharper, riskier, unguarded. Stepping into the open with words that didn't sound like PR, but like a long-delayed confession. Before we walk that dim curve of the coast together, remember, subscribe if you want stories told without cosmetic gloss, and hit join if you believe in late-night truth hunting. Your support keeps the light on while the city sleeps. The Istanbul night moves with a pulse that's equal parts romance and restlessness, especially along the Bosphorus where the tide brushes the stone and the lights skim the surface like the shards of a chandelier. It was along this bright, uneasy seam between land and sea that a routine celebrity stop turned into something far more intimate and unnerving. Cameras were primed for the standard rotations, smiles rehearsed, lines memorized, facts aligned into tiny palatable bites. Instead, a tide shift. The script went missing. The air tightened. It wasn't just a chat, it was a reckoning, the kind that divides rooms, comment sections, even friend groups, some calling it bravery, others calling it professional self-sabotage. The wharf lamps burned with interrogating patience, like eyes that wouldn't blink. At their center, all attention gathered around a figure who had kept the city at arm's length for months. Erkan had chosen silence for a long stretch, letting work miles away and a strict daily grind do the talking. He became a rumor in his own neighborhood. But not last night. It wasn't a PDF posted by a manager that broke the quiet. It was him, real skin, real pulse, a new look, a different gravity, stepping out with sentences that landed more like verdicts he was willing to accept. It unfolded with cinematic rhythm. A black car, polished enough to mirror the streetlights and dark enough to hide 1,000 thoughts, rolled to a stop by the beach. The engine went quiet, the crowd softened to a hush, and a door opened like a cut in the night. The Erkan who crossed the curb felt rewritten. Something had been left behind, the safe glow, the courtly cleanliness, the market-friendly charm that made a career so smooth you barely saw it working. In its place was a stance, a bolder line, a tension that pulled the gaze forward and refused to let go. Within seconds, phones were up, and timelines began to agree on a single idea: the transformation wasn't cosmetic. His hair no longer sat like a logo, it moved the way a decision moves, unconcerned with old rules. The jacket was leather, but it read less like a wardrobe choice and more like resolve, armor against second-guessing. It said, no more easy vibes, no more approved adjectives. But make no mistake, the haircut wasn't the earthquake. The shock was in the sentences that followed, in the way he stood still and let the press ask about the one thing he never touches. He became a man who would rather be misunderstood than continue being curated. For the first time in a long time, Erkan opened the door on his private rooms. Reporters who expected shut-down lines instead found themselves racing to keep up, scrambling to catch exact phrasing, watching the play of expression as if each muscle mattered. Gone was the diplomatic refusal. In its place, direct replies. Words that risked being held to the fire later, but were said anyway. You could sense a kind of grim resolve in the way he stood there, a vibe that suggested he was prepared to pay the price of the admission he was making. And then, as if pulled by a tide that has been there all along, one name moved to the very center. Hzal Sabesi. Her name had orbited quiet conversations for years, a gravity you don't see but still feel, the kind of presence that turns private glances into public theories. Suddenly, he put it right where everyone could see it. The night's main course wasn't style or schedule, it was the map of his heart. He acknowledged a recent, calm relationship with someone outside the spotlight, blessing it with respect rather than denial. Then he said the sentence that made the crowd inhale: there is, and has always been, a Hzal Sabesi factor. Say that out loud for a second, the Hzal Sabesi factor. Not a nostalgia postcard, not a rumor to be swatted away, but a standard so tall it casts shade over anything that tries to grow after it. He wasn't describing a memory. He was naming a scale by which everything subsequent gets measured. He said it without flinch, like a man tired of pretending the past doesn't sit in the room. He added, softer now, that what the two of them lived still won't leave him, that it lingers in the corners he hasn't cleaned, in the songs he pretends not to know by heart. Then came the sentence that made time lurch. He is doing everything he can to repair what broke, to find their rhythm again, but... He left the last word hanging like a bridge unfinished. That but floated above the crowd, heavy with unspoken pages, and no one dared to interrupt it. He looked past the cluster of flashes and questions toward the dark water, as though the waves knew the rest of the sentence and might keep it for him until he was ready to say it. Tell us, Turkish Spotlight Secrets family, is this ground love or slow-motion self-harm? Is it devotion or a refusal to let the present breathe? Drop your thoughts where we can all read them, and while you're there, a like goes farther than you think in helping us chase these stories when everyone else has gone home. The section became a confessional, the night turned solemn and curious, a living room conversation that just happened to be surrounded by press credentials and lenses. The internet responded like a match to dry paper. Some crowned him a rare kind of honest. A man willing to put his image on the line for the thing that still keeps him awake. They called it clarity, even heroism, the sort of admission that people don't make when everything is going well, but only when they are done lying to themselves. Others were furious. They argued he had made his recent partner into collateral, someone kind and quiet now rendered a public footnote to an unresolved legend. They asked who deserves to live in a competition they never enrolled in, especially against a story that feels mythic to strangers. And because nights like this never settle at one layer, the topic shifted toward jealousy, the stubborn weed that grows in every well-lit garden. He said, with a shrug that invited interpretation, that jealousy happens, that they've lived with it for a long time, and found their way around it. Vague on purpose. Did he mean the new relationship's tremors? Or the wildfire that once burned between him and Hazal? He let the words sit there to smoke a little, leaving everyone to decide which chapter they belonged to. One thing came into focus: Erkan doesn't want to carry the role that made his career feel frictionless. The outer change, the cut, the leather, the posture, was merely a photograph of an internal announcement. By naming the Hzal Sabesi factor, he granted legitimacy to what fan corners had long suspected. Some loves don't end. They become weather. They frame the light, they season the air, they tint everything you see afterward. He admitted the quiet relationship had been genuinely peaceful, but peace wasn't the same as being cured of a fire. That difference, that or he could not put down, was the shock of the evening. Once the questions thinned and the murmurs turned into strategy, he returned to that black car and slid into the night. The skyline kept glittering like nothing had changed, but everything had. Was he walking toward the reconciliation he said he was fighting for? Would she even open that door? Or is the Hazal factor not a gateway but a wall, an altitude none of his choices can climb? The only certainty left is that the fairy tale prince is no longer the headline. The statue cracked. The human stepped forward, with scars that show and a love that refuses to be convenient. We'll be watching every ripple from this point on. If there's a call, a message, a meeting, a turn. If the stalemate breaks in either direction, you'll hear it here first. Make sure you're subscribed, and if our kind of storytelling matters to you, the join button makes you part of how we do this work. Nights like this one remind us that behind posters and premiere photos, two people once found a language that made sense to them. Whether they speak it again is the cliffhanger. Before we leave you, a final thought meant not as a slogan, but as a gentle nudge. Sometimes the new edge on a man is not a rebellion, but a surrender to the truth he's been resisting. Sometimes the so-called bad boy is only someone exhausted with pretending that the past is neat and contained. And sometimes a woman's name is not a chapter, it's a compass. If the Hzal Sabesi factor is a compass, then every step he takes will point where it points, even if the path he must walk to reach it is uneven, public, and full of judgment. So here we are, back at the shoreline where he said what he said, with the waves whispering versions of the same story long after the lens is packed up. A night that began like another publicity cycle ended like a diary entry with witnesses. Love, pride, fear, apology, the courage to say a sentence that can't be unsaid. Whatever happens next, reunion or release, will not erase this moment. It will only explain it. And when the city wakes and the day presses on, remember this is not about myth-making. It's about two names, Erkan Meriç and Hzal Sabesi, and a truth that waited for the dark to finally be called by its name.